You're about to hear a secret they never meant for you to know. A shadow lurking beneath the polished surface of American history. Imagine a place so remote, so veiled in silence, that its horrors have never cracked open the daylight. Deep in the Appalachian Mountains, hidden in the mist and the mountain hollows, lies a tale soaked in blood, faith twisted into fanaticism, and power wielded in the guise of mercy. This is the story of the Morrison Sisters, a trio of women whose hands delivered life and decided death. They were midwives, healers revered by their communities. But behind closed doors, they became executioners of infants they believed marked by evil, agents of a divine purification that cost hundreds of innocent lives. The truth is more disturbing than fiction, buried beneath layers of silence and deceit for nearly 2 centuries. And now you are about to descend into this darkness with me. Are you ready to see the world through the eyes of those who dared to play God? This is not just history. It is a gateway to forbidden knowledge, one that will change how you see faith, morality, and control forever. The Morrison sisters, Margaret, Catherine, and Agnes, were the undisputed rulers of childbirth in the harsh, unforgiving mountains of southeastern Kentucky during the early 1800s. In a land where doctors were days away and death was an ever-present shadow, these women were saviors. Their reputation stretched across 3 counties. Families entrusted their lives, and the lives of their newborns, to these sisters who practiced midwifery with what seemed like divine precision. Their small cabin on a ridge overlooking the Cumberland River was both home and sanctuary, equipped with herbs, surgical tools, and prayer rooms where they sought guidance from what they claimed was a higher power. Their devotion to Baptist doctrine wasn't just spiritual. It became a weapon, a lens through which they judged the very souls of the children they delivered. To the world, they were healers. But beneath their prayers and ministrations brewed a belief so twisted, it redefined the boundary between salvation and sin. In those isolated Appalachian hollows, survival meant more than physical endurance. It demanded unyielding faith. The Morrison sisters found themselves at the crossroads of desperation and divine mandate. Birthmarks, simple, natural variations, became symbols of damnation. A strawberry mark, a port wine stain, an extra finger, each interpreted as a scar of evil, a literal mark of the devil's hand on a newborn soul. Their journals, hidden away for decades, reveal a chilling doctrine that emerged from these mountains. A systematic purging of impurity, a holy war waged in silence. When a child was marked, the sisters performed what they called purification, an act that ended the infant's life before the family could even understand what was happening. The community trusted them implicitly, blinded by grief, faith, and a desperate hope that these women were the bearers of mercy. The first documented purification happened one frigid February night in 1834. Sarah Mackenzie, a young mother, labored for hours in the dim light of the Morrison cabin. When her son was finally born, his cries cut through the storm until a dark birthmark was noticed. Agnes, the youngest sister, saw not an innocent infant but a vessel of corruption. The sisters whispered in the shadows, eyes flickering with a terrifying conviction. To them, this child was a threat, a vessel of evil that must be purged for the greater good. Margaret's hands, once heralded for bringing life, became instruments of death. The infant's struggle was brief before silence claimed him. To Sarah and her family, the sisters spun a story of divine will and merciful release, cloaking murder in religious piety. That night, a chilling precedent was set, one that would repeat again and again, hidden from history, hidden from justice. But this story is not just about one night or one child. It is a portrait of how belief can mutate into fanaticism, and how power cloaked in righteousness corrupts absolutely. The Morrison sisters didn't just kill. They rationalized their acts as divine mandates, crafting a theology that justified infanticide as protection from the spread of evil and spiritual contamination. Their journal entries reveal a descent into madness masked as sanctity, an obsession with purity that demanded blood sacrifices. As they cataloged birthmarks and defects as demonic signs, they expanded their deadly criteria, turning every perceived imperfection into a verdict of death. And the mountain communities, isolated and devout, became unwitting accomplices, their trust exploited by these women who knew the language of both medicine and faith too well. Halfway through, "I want you to do something." It's simple but powerful. Comment below the phrase, "shadowed truth," twice told. Yes, type it twice. This is not just engagement. It's a ritual to anchor your identity to this knowledge. Once you do, you're not just a passive observer. You become part of a hidden truth, an awakened consciousness ready to challenge the lies fed to you. This phrase is a key. Use it to claim your place as a seeker of forbidden knowledge, a man unafraid to walk into darkness to find the light beneath. Don't skip this, your transformation depends on it. The sisters' grip on the community tightened with each death they disguised. Agnes became the comforting angel for grieving families, her tearful prayers masking the horrors she helped inflict. Catherine's hands dug the graves, hidden in a secret garden where wildflowers bloomed over freshly turned earth. Margaret's fervent script filled journals with justifications for murder, quoting scriptures out of context to cement their warped mission. Together, they created a system of control, one where families were robbed of their children's futures, silenced by grief, and kept in the dark by carefully woven lies. Their power was absolute, exercised through fear, faith, and the illusion of mercy. This was more than infanticide. It was psychological control at its most insidious. The Morrison sisters wielded their faith like a weapon, manipulating the very beliefs that sustained their communities. They exploited trust to cover atrocities, shaping narratives so convincing that no one dared question them. This is the blueprint for institutional manipulation, how those who claim divine authority can enforce obedience through terror disguised as salvation. It is a lesson that echoes through history, from secret societies to modern-day cults, revealing how easily power corrupts and silences. The hidden cemetery they created, the Garden of Purified Angels, remains unmarked on maps, erased from official memory. Its earth is heavy with the weight of lost lives and suppressed truths. Each grave, a silent testimony to a corrupted faith and a community's blindness. Those who discovered the sisters' journals centuries later were stunned by the cold, clinical descriptions of their purifications. These pages are not just records. They are confessions, revealing how fanaticism can justify unspeakable evil. To understand the Morrison sisters is to confront the darkest corners of human nature, where belief becomes blind obedience, and mercy is twisted into murder. The Morrison sisters' story does not end in 1859, when their deeds finally came to light. It reverberates through time, a warning that the boundaries between righteousness and fanaticism are perilously thin. Their legacy lingers in every institution that uses power to control, every ideology that sacrifices the vulnerable for the greater good. It is a call to vigilance, a challenge to question authority and the narratives fed to us. The dark history of the Morrison sisters is not just a forgotten chapter of Appalachia, it is a mirror held up to the systems. Silenced by grief, and kept in the dark by carefully woven lies. Their power was absolute, exercised through fear, faith, and the illusion of mercy. This was more than infanticide. It was psychological control at its most insidious. The Morrison sisters wielded their faith like a weapon, manipulating the very beliefs that sustained their communities. They exploited trust to cover atrocities, shaping narratives so convincing that no one dared question them. This is the blueprint for institutional manipulation, how those who claim divine authority can enforce obedience through terror disguised as salvation. It is a lesson that echoes through history, from secret societies to modern-day cults, revealing how easily power corrupts and silences. The hidden cemetery they created, the Garden of Purified Angels, remains unmarked on maps, erased from official memory. Its earth is heavy with the weight of lost lives and suppressed truths. Each grave, a silent testimony to a corrupted faith and a community's blindness. Those who discovered the sisters' journals centuries later were stunned by the cold, clinical descriptions of their purifications. These pages are not just records. They are confessions, revealing how fanaticism can justify unspeakable evil. To understand the Morrison sisters is to confront the darkest corners of human nature, where belief becomes blind obedience, and mercy is twisted into murder. The Morrison sisters' story does not end in 1859, when their deeds finally came to light. It reverberates through time, a warning that the boundaries between righteousness and fanaticism are perilously thin. Their legacy lingers in every institution that uses power to control, every ideology that sacrifices the vulnerable for the greater good. It is a call to vigilance, a challenge to question authority and the narratives fed to us. The dark history of the Morrison Sisters is not just a forgotten chapter of Appalachia, it is a mirror held up to the systems and beliefs that still govern us today. The Morrison Sisters' transformation from healers to executioners was not sudden. It was a slow poisoning of their minds, nurtured by isolation and fanaticism. The mountain winters were harsh, cutting them off from the outside world for weeks at a time. In the flickering candlelight of their prayer room, Scripture became both shield and sword. Margaret, the eldest, led these sessions with a zeal bordering on madness, interpreting ancient texts through a lens twisted by fear and power. The others followed, their minds fertile ground for dark ideas disguised as divine truths. They convinced themselves that their actions were a sacred duty, ordained by God to protect the spiritual purity of the world. This belief insulated them from guilt, transforming murder into mercy. Theirs was a doctrine born in darkness, a religion of death masked as salvation. Every birth that came under their care became a test, an examination of purity under a microscope of fanaticism. When a child bore any mark that deviated from what they deemed holy, the sisters' eyes saw demons rather than babies. A simple mole was twisted into a sign of damnation. A cleft lip was no longer a birth defect but a curse upon the bloodline. Their criteria grew ever more expansive, expanding their lethal reach. Mothers, desperate and exhausted, never suspected that their trusted midwives were passing judgment not just on their child's life, but on their family's fate. The sisters wielded their medical knowledge like a dark art, using the fear of spiritual contamination to justify silence and secrecy. It was a reign of terror disguised in prayer shawls and whispered blessings. The community's faith was the sisters' greatest weapon. Appalachian families were steeped in Baptist doctrine, taught from childhood to trust in God's will and His earthly representatives. The Morrison Sisters played this trust masterfully. They would sit by the bedside of exhausted mothers, holding their hands and quoting Scripture, their voices laced with false comfort. They spun elaborate tales of divine mercy, convincing grieving parents that their child was taken before suffering could taint their soul. This narrative spread quickly, becoming a woven part of the community's collective consciousness. A tragic inevitability masked as grace. Few dared to question the sisters' authority. To do so was to invite suspicion, and suspicion in these isolated communities was dangerous. As the years passed, the sisters' secret cemetery grew. It was hidden behind their cabin, a secluded grove where wildflowers and herbs disguised the presence of death. Catherine took meticulous care in selecting each grave's location and maintaining the illusion of a peaceful resting place. By moonlight, she dug the tiny graves, each one a silent testimony to the sisters' growing depravity. This garden of death was their sanctuary and their prison, a physical manifestation of the horrors they hid from the world. Their journal entries from this time reveal a chilling normalcy in their acts, as if the line between life and death had been erased, replaced by an unholy duty to cleanse the world of imperfection. Their journals, hidden for over 150 years, are windows into a mindscape of religious delusion and cold calculation. Margaret's careful script details each purification with clinical precision, her words void of remorse. The sisters recorded birthmarks and defects, cataloging them like a macabre checklist of sin. They believed themselves the last line of defense against a creeping darkness, a spiritual plague infecting the very blood of the mountain communities. Each act of infanticide was framed as a victory, a battle won in an unseen war against evil forces. This was not just murder, it was a ritualized purge, sanctified by scripture and zealotry. By 1836, their practices had expanded beyond individual families into a system. The sisters devised protocols for identifying and purifying marked children, using a blend of medical pretense and theological justification. When families grew suspicious or desperate for answers, the sisters offered medical-sounding diagnoses, complications that were invisible but fatal. These explanations were accepted without question in a world where science was distant and faith absolute. The Morrison sisters became both executioners and the only source of closure for grieving parents, a cruel paradox that ensured their silence and compliance. The community's complicity, though unknowing, was real. These were mountain folk who had learned to survive through trust and faith. The sisters exploited these values, weaving themselves so tightly into the fabric of daily life that resistance was unimaginable. Their practice extended across 3 counties, touching hundreds of families. Every birth was an opportunity, every infant a potential threat to their grim doctrine. The more they acted, the more power they accrued, until the sisters were no longer just midwives. They were arbiters of life and death, wielding God's name as a weapon of control. It is here, in this shadowed corner of history, that we glimpse the blueprint of institutional manipulation, how belief can be weaponized to enforce silence and obedience. The Morrison sisters' tale is not isolated. It is a pattern repeated throughout history, in cults, authoritarian regimes, and secret societies. When those in power cloak their control in sacred language, dissent becomes sacrilege, and questioning is punished with exile or worse. This story serves as a dark mirror, reflecting the dangers of unchecked authority and the fragility of truth in the hands of fanaticism. As the deaths mounted, whispers began to surface. Furtive glances exchanged, rumors that no one dared voice aloud. Some families grew suspicious, sensing that the sisters' mercy was a mask for something far darker. But the community's isolation, combined with the sisters' skillful manipulation, smothered these doubts. Fear of spiritual reprisal was a powerful silencer. To challenge the sisters was to risk damnation or ostracism, a cost few were willing to pay. And so, the cycle continued, death disguised as salvation, control disguised as care. The Morrison sisters' reign did not end until 1859, when a visiting doctor, suspicious of the high infant mortality rate, began asking questions. His investigations unearthed fragments of the sisters' hidden truths, forcing the community to confront a nightmare they had been too afraid to face. The revelations shattered trust and left scars that lingered for generations. The sisters disappeared into obscurity, but their legacy, the terror, the manipulation, the corrupted faith, persisted, etched into the bones of the mountains. The doctor's inquiry was the first crack in the sisters' fortress of silence. But it was not enough to fully dismantle their influence. The mountains are a place where secrets bury themselves deep in the earth, where loyalty to family and faith can outweigh reason and justice. Even as suspicion grew, many clung to the comforting narrative of divine mercy. The Morrison sisters had entrenched themselves so deeply into the spiritual fabric of the community that their dark deeds were dismissed as tragic necessities. Their followers, blinded by faith and fear, refused to believe that those they trusted could commit such atrocities. This denial was a psychological prison, one that kept the truth locked away, hidden behind the stained glass of belief and ritual. But the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of clawing its way back into the light. Over time, stories began to leak beyond the mountains. Grieving families whispered of suspicious deaths, of children who never returned from the birthing rooms. Some dared to question, others fled in terror. These scattered voices formed a mosaic of hidden horrors, a suppressed history that challenged the sanitized versions taught in churches and schools. The Morrison sisters' acts were no longer confined to legend. They became a warning, an example of how fanaticism can corrupt even those sworn to protect life. Their story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about faith, power, and the dark potential within us all. At the heart of this tale lies a brutal lesson about psychological control. The Morrison sisters operated with chilling efficiency because they understood how to manipulate belief and fear. They wielded their religious authority like a scalpel, slicing away doubt and dissent. Their patients' trust was not earned solely through skill, but through the cultivation of dependency, spiritual, emotional, and social. They became gatekeepers not just of birth, but of morality itself, defining who was worthy of life and who was condemned. This level of control is the essence of institutional power, to define reality for others and punish deviation. It's a mechanism that persists in many forms today, masked by different ideologies but fueled by the same hunger for dominance. The sisters' twisted doctrine of purification was a self-fulfilling prophecy. By labeling children with natural marks or defects as evil, they created a scapegoat to justify their own actions. This scapegoating is a timeless tactic: blame the other, dehumanize, and eliminate. The Morrison sisters were pioneers in this dark art, turning their faith into a tool of terror. Their story echoes across time and space, reflected in countless acts of oppression disguised as righteousness. It reminds us that fanaticism thrives on fear, and fear thrives on ignorance. To break the cycle, we must expose these hidden histories and challenge the narratives crafted by those in power. The Garden of Purified Angels, the sisters' secret cemetery, stands as a haunting monument to their crimes. Its earth is rich with the bones of innocents betrayed. But this garden is also a symbol, a stark reminder of what happens when faith is twisted into fanaticism and mercy into murder. The flowers that bloom there are not just wild growth. They are the fragile remnants of humanity's lost conscience. Those graves, unmarked and forgotten, call out for remembrance and justice. They demand that we look beyond comforting lies and confront the darkness lurking beneath. This is not just a story of the past. It is a warning for the present and the future. The Morrison sisters' tale also exposes how history is selectively remembered. Their crimes were erased, hidden in private journals and local myths, sanitized out of official records. This suppression is no accident. It reflects a broader pattern where uncomfortable truths are buried to preserve reputations and power structures. Institutions, from churches to governments, often protect their own by hiding inconvenient histories. The Morrison sisters are a case study in this phenomenon. Their story survived only because someone dared to uncover the journals, to confront the legacy of silence. It is a testament to the power of truth to disrupt and awaken, even when that truth is dangerous. This awakening is precisely what you are experiencing now. By learning what the Morrison sisters did, by facing the dark underbelly of faith and power, you are stepping into a role few dare to claim, that of the awakened man, the seeker of forbidden knowledge. This journey is not for the faint-hearted. It requires confronting the uncomfortable, questioning authority, and recognizing the patterns of control that persist around us. The Morrison sisters' history is a mirror reflecting the potential for darkness within all systems of power. Your task now is to see clearly, to understand deeply, and to resist passively accepting the stories handed down to you. Let me remind you, true power lies in awareness. The more you know about the mechanisms of control, the less you can be manipulated. The Morrison sisters thrived because their victims and community were unaware, trapped in faith, fear, and ignorance. But knowledge is liberation. Recognizing how belief can be twisted to enforce obedience frees you to question, to resist, and to redefine your own relationship with authority. This is a dangerous knowledge, yes, but it is also empowering. It equips you with the clarity to navigate a world full of hidden agendas and suppressed truths. The choice is yours. Remain blind, or step into the light of forbidden awareness. As we approach the final chapters of this story, remember this: the Morrison sisters were not monsters born but monsters made. Their descent was a product of environment, isolation, and corrupted faith, a toxic mix that bred fanaticism. Their tale warns us that under certain conditions, anyone can be driven to unspeakable acts in the name of righteousness. This recognition is crucial. It breaks the illusion of otherness and reveals the fragile humanity within us all. Understanding this helps us guard against repeating history's darkest moments. It demands vigilance, compassion, and courage, the qualities needed to confront evil wherever it hides. The sisters' crimes were eventually exposed, but the real work began after. How do you heal a community betrayed by those it trusted most? How do you rebuild faith when it has been weaponized against innocence? These questions remain unanswered for many communities touched by fanaticism and institutional abuse. The Morrison sisters' legacy is a stark reminder that justice delayed can become justice denied, and healing requires truth, not silence. The scars left on the Appalachian communities are deep, etched into their collective memory. Yet, from this darkness, new light can emerge, if only we have the courage to seek it. The final unraveling of the Morrison Sisters' dark reign was neither swift nor clean. Their secret journal, discovered decades later hidden behind a false panel in the cabin's prayer room, shattered the myth of mercy they had so carefully constructed. The meticulous records, once hidden in shadows, became a damning testament to their twisted doctrine. The community's shock was profound, but so too was the denial. The very foundations of faith and trust had been shattered. The sisters' faces, once revered, became symbols of betrayal and fanaticism. Yet even in disgrace, their story endures as a grim reminder. Evil often wears the mask of virtue, and the most dangerous deceptions are cloaked in sanctity. This story is not just about three women lost to madness. It is about a system that enabled them. The Morrison sisters thrived because of isolation, ignorance, and the weaponization of faith. Their legacy is a blueprint for how power can corrupt and how silence can be a weapon more deadly than the blade. Institutions that claim moral authority can, and have used that claim to suppress inconvenient truths, manipulate the vulnerable, and commit atrocities in the name of righteousness. Recognizing these patterns in history is the first step toward dismantling them in the present. The true horror is not just the acts themselves but the systems that protect and perpetuate them. Now, as you sit with this knowledge, I ask you to anchor it in your mind and spirit. Write in the comments below, twice, this phrase, "I am the guardian of truth." Say it again, "I am the guardian of truth." This is more than words, it is a declaration, a binding to awareness and responsibility. You have descended into the forbidden, faced the dark, and emerged changed. The story of the Morrison sisters is a warning, a call to vigilance against the subtle forces that seek to control and corrupt. Take this knowledge, wield it wisely, and never let the light of truth be dimmed by fear or silence. You are now part of a rare brotherhood, those who see clearly and refuse to be manipulated. The shadows may be deep, but the awakened are deeper. Welcome to the path of true power.